Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time to a place where gods walk among people, where a whisper from Olympus might reshape an entire city, and where something as simple as a tree gnarled, fragrant, and quietly stubborn could spark an economic revolution and an eventual crisis. You stand barefoot on the stony slope of the Acropolis, dusk spilling gold across white marble, and the hum of cicadas layering over the faint bleat of distant goats. Somewhere below, a man is yelling about olive prices again. It's a scatter of temples, shrines, and homes stacked like clay bricks on this rocky hill. People are busy trying to stay alive, avoid angering capricious deities, and cook something edible over fires that never quite seem to catch. It's always amazing seeing where you're listening from. You haven't even figured out what a drachma is. One sip from an unboiled water jug, one wrong guess in a temple ritual, and boom, smitten by Hera, dysentery, or both. You try not to stare too hard at a particularly tall man with a trident-shaped scar on his forehead, just in case. Back then, it was just a promising cluster of settlements with good access to the sea, some arable land, and plenty of sunshine. It smells like goat fat and incense. A flute plays something vaguely menacing. Children giggle. Someone drops a fig. Athena, wise and composed, versus Poseidon, dramatic and always a bit damp. A few olives shimmer at the tips of the branches as though the tree itself is smiling. It won't rust their tools. It might if their patient feed them. You probably won't survive this, let's be honest. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. There's a group that insists Poseidon's water can be used for fish farming. Another group points out that they don't have fish farms yet. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. They built her a temple. They even vowed to protect the olive tree forever, calling it the Moria, the secret root from which all blessings come. Not thrilled. He storms off, possibly creating a minor earthquake on his way out. The sea hisses for days. Fishermen complain. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here to witness a divine showdown. Not a war not yet, but a competition. They've both been eyeing the city not yet called Athens, of course. And her gift, the humble olive, will become something no one quite expects. A miracle, a market, and eventually, a massive bureaucratic nightmare. You trail behind a crowd gathering near a rocky outcrop where elders and priests have set up some kind of ceremonial boundary. A bit of sunlight and the quiet determination of a goddess with a plan, maybe even a little smug. The tension thickens like honey left in the sun, and then the sky changes. A rumble rolls through the crowd like a wave. The sea god arrives first. Poseidon doesn't walk, he lands with a stomp that cracks open the rock at his feet. He raises his trident and drives it into the earth, but then someone whispers, "It's salty." A boy dips his fingers in, licks them. There's a moment of silence. A polite cough from an elder. Poseidon raises an eyebrow. Then, with no thunderclap, no epic entrance music, Athena simply walks forward. She's calm, collected. It's a seed. She kneels, presses it into the soil near Poseidon's still gurgling spring, and steps back. Nothing happens. The crowd murmurs, a donkey brace. Then slowly, almost shyly, a shoot emerges. It curls upward, growing with grace rather than flash. Leaves unfurl like green feathers. It smells clean, fresh. The breeze changes. Someone sighs. This, Athena says, is a gift for the people. a symbol of peace, prosperity, and endurance, and people start nodding. Not dramatically, just thoughtfully. The tree won't flood their homes. It's still small, kind of spindly, but it grows where no one expected it to. And that's when things get interesting. In the weeks that follow, debate erupts. People gather in homes, temples, and market stalls, arguing gently about which gift matters more. Priests consult omens. Birds are watched. Goat entrails are examined. The usual. And then it's decided. The people, likely through a combination of noble influence, priestly suggestion, and maybe a little divine nudging, choose Athena. They name their city after her. Poseidon is, and Athena? She watches quietly. She's won. Her name will live on through centuries. Because here's the thing about miracles. Once people figure out they can make money from them, they tend to overdo it. But that comes later. For now, you rest beneath the young tree, its silver-green leaves rustling gently, and try to imagine a world that's just been changed forever by a seed. A bit of sunlight and the quiet determination of a goddess with a plan. The problem with Poseidon really is that he never quite masters subtlety. You're still lounging under the newborn olive tree, letting the leaves fan a breeze over your cheeks when the ground rumbles again. Another splashy entrance. Because Poseidon isn't quite done with Athens, not by a long shot. This time, he brings a horse. Yes, a literal horse. Out of seawater. Just whoosh, there it is, shimmering and snorting, dripping foam like it just galloped through a thunderstorm made of brine. Immediate. Historians still argue whether the horse or the spring came first, but honestly, when a god shows up with both a weaponized fountain and a magical equine, the timeline gets a little murky. A few Athenian children squeal. One tries to pet it and is promptly bitten. Hard to manage. The saltwater spring is now a shallow pool with a faintly fishy odor and mosquito problem. Some versions of the myth claim Poseidon invented horses altogether, which, if true, is an absolutely wild flex for a sea god. A few small olives have been carefully harvested and, with some trial and error, pressed into a green gold liquid. That's like the god of the forest inventing submarines. But maybe he just summoned them from his chaotic toolbox of natural disasters and weird animal hybrids. Some say this scene happened before the olive tree. Others claim it was Poseidon as desperate follow-up after he realized his salt spring wasn't he winning hearts. Feels nice, she says. Smells better than goat. A woman, possibly a priestess, possibly just tired of everyone arguing, starts rubbing the oil into her skin, twice, where cooks experiment with frying bits of fish. To the temples where lamps now burn with a steady smokeless flame that's frankly a huge upgrade from rancid animal fat. Either way, the message is clear. Poseidon wants to impress. And unlike Athena's slow-growing, future-proof gift, his offerings are bold, flashy. A group of young men follow behind it, laughing nervously, unsure if they're meant to worship it or run away. And Poseidon's gifts? Well, the salt spring is being cautiously filled in, and the horse has been regifted to a nearby general. Her new temple, modest but dignified, now includes a sacred enclosure around the olive tree. You peek at the work in progress and note Athena looks calm and wise. The city is choosing its story, brick by brick, statue by statue. Poseidon looks like he's yelling at a waiter. People whisper prayers to Poseidon just in case. Seafarers leave coins at the docks before voyages. You notice one merchant quietly pouring a bit of oil into the sea. A bribe? A peace offering? Even though half the population still just refers to it as the hill. But the change is happening. Slowly, the olive tree is becoming a symbol. Not just of Athena's wisdom, but of the city's identity. Guards stand nearby. They don't do much. Mostly, they just make sure no one steals a leaf, probably. The rivalry smolders. One of them slips in a puddle and declares it a blessing. You nod as if that explains anything. The sacred gift is no longer just sacred, it's becoming economic infrastructure. Once a symbol of divine favor is now currency, medicine, lotion, lamp fuel, and the reason half the city's merchants are suddenly wearing better tunics. He shrugs. Can't hurt, he says. Ancient times were confusing. There's grumbling in the agri. Some say the gods are angry. Others say it's just the weather. Historians still debate how much of this divine vengeance was myth-making and how much was just bad luck. The horse, you're told, represents war, power, mobility. You trail the horse as it prances through the street, still steaming with ocean mist. The priests convene again, this time with less fanfare. A few are openly annoyed. The novelty of divine auditions is wearing thin. The sea god's gifts are. The horse has kicked a hole in someone's storage jar. Meanwhile, Athena's tree is thriving. Slowly, of course, but thriving. Its branches now offer shade to the occasional goat. It smells sharp, peppery, like summer in a bottle. And that's when something interesting happens. The crowd stares, she shrugs, her arms shimmer. And with that, ancient marketing is born. You follow the oil's journey through the city, to the gymnasiums where athletes discover it makes their muscles look extra heroic. To the kitchens soon, olive oil isn't just a sacred symbol, it's useful. But Poseidon isn't a god who lets rejection go quietly. Storms start appearing off the coast, fishing boats capsize. Crops near the sea die unexpectedly. You dip your toe in a roadside puddle and find it warm. Too warm, a nearby elder mutters, that's Poseidon's doing. Back on the Acropolis, Athena is being honored. A young artisan begins sculpting the moment of the contest, Poseidon striking the rock, Athena planting the seed. The imagery is deliberate. You wander the streets that now proudly call themselves Athens. One man sells tiny wooden carvings of the goddess holding a branch. Another woman offers pressed oil in painted jars, each marked with a tiny owl. And beneath it all, in temples, you ask him, and that's where the myth meets the marketplace. Olive oil, and still, no one really knows what to do with the horse. You find yourself wandering through a grove just beyond the edge of Athens, a place still tangled with weeds and thorns, but now dotted with young olive trees. They're scrappy little things, twisted like they've been through a windstorm even though the day is calm. Their leaves shimmer in that way only olive leaves do, green on one side, silver on the other, always fluttering as if deciding which color suits the moment best. This is where Athena's quiet gift is really starting to grow. You trail behind an old man with a woven basket and a cane carved to look like an owl. He talks as he walks, mostly to the trees, occasionally to you. They're stubborn, he says, squinting up at the branches. Like the goddess, I suppose. Give them dry soil, give them stone, give them nothing, and they still grow. Just very, very slowly. And that's the first thing everyone learns about olives. They don't hurry. No one in ancient Athens is planting olives for a quick harvest. These trees are an investment in decades, even centuries. Some say Athena picked the olive tree because of that, a living symbol of long-term wisdom in a culture that otherwise loves a quick myth and a quicker battle. And when they do fruit, the yield is modest. A few dozen small, bitter green drops, barely edible straight from the tree. Which, of course, someone had to find out the hard way. You spot a teenager nearby with a puckered face and an olive pit on the ground beside him. Lesson learned. The key is processing. The olives are soaked, cured, crushed, and pressed, preferably in a stone mill powered by a donkey with zero motivation. The oil that emerges is cloudy at first, then settles into that golden green glow that makes everything look like it's been touched by sunlight. And it's not just about taste. This stuff is practical. Suddenly, Athenians are rubbing it on sore muscles, softening their feet, preserving food, waterproofing leather, and lighting lamps. There is even a woman at the market who swears it keeps her hair from frizzing in the sea breeze. It's the ancient Greek version of coconut oil. Someone somewhere is definitely putting it on a rash and claiming it's divine. As the demand grows, so does the reverence. That original tree, the one Athena planted during her contest with Poseidon, is now treated like royalty. The area around it becomes sacred ground. People leave offerings at its roots. No one's allowed to touch it. Not a leaf. Not a twig. They call it the Moria, and it's the first of several trees eventually declared sacred. Some say they're direct descendants of Athena's original tree, though historians still argue whether there was a real genealogy of olive trees, or if the whole thing was just a clever way to get tax breaks. You visit one of these trees cordoned off behind a low stone wall. A priest stands nearby with a bored look and a twig broom. It dropped an olive this morning, he tells you. Merely caused a fight. You nod politely and step back. Around the sacred tree cult grows a small but serious bureaucracy. Officials are appointed to oversee the Moriae, the sacred olives of the state. They have scrolls, seals, signet rings. They inspect groves. They measure branches. If you even think about cutting one down, you're in trouble. Like real trouble. Death penalty level trouble. That's right, chopping down or damaging a sacred olive tree in Athens wasn't just a gardening crime. It was sacrilege. You might as well insult Athena's helmet to her face. The punishment was severe and not just to appease the gods. These trees were state property, economic lifelines, national symbols. They were to be protected, not pruned, and yet, accidents happen. You hear about a young farmer accused of sneaking into a sacred grove to collect firewood. He claimed he didn't know the tree was sacred. It looked normal, he said. The court wasn't amused. He was exiled. Possibly lucky to be alive. You start to realize how something as quiet and natural as a tree can spiral into layers of symbolism, law, and ritual. Athena didn't just plant a tree, she sparked a bureaucracy, a religion, and an agricultural arms race. And still the oil flows. Jars of it now line market stalls. The rich store it in ornately painted amphorae, while the poor scrape the dregs from clay bowls. You pass a man bottling oil into small vials and selling it as divine essence for foot sores. The label has Athena's owl on it. He winks at you. Back at the gymnasium, athletes are rubbing it onto their chests before a wrestling match. Someone offers you a handful. You decline. The sun's too hot and you're already sweating through your tunic. No need to glisten on purpose. You pause for a moment beside a group of women weaving garlands near a shaded spring. One of them is telling a story how Athena gave the olive tree not just for oil but as a test. A test to see if humans could take something simple and treat it with care. She shakes her head and adds, "We're not doing great." She has a point. You notice some groves already overplucked. Trees bent awkwardly, their branches thin from too much too soon. There's talk of exporting oil across the sea. Some worry that the sacred trees might get mixed up with the commercial ones. The lines between gift, resource, and commodity are beginning to blur. The city is growing, and with it, its appetite. For oil. For rules. For stories that explain why a tree matters more than a statue. And somewhere you imagine Athena watching. Not with fury, not even with pride. Just that calm, calculating wisdom that knows how these things go. The tree was just the beginning. The vote, as it turns out, wasn't exactly what we'd call democratic. You were sipping watered wine because straight wine is ancient. Athens is practically rocket fuel, and listening to a fish seller explain how the people chose Athena. His version involves dreams, birds flying in the right direction, and someone claiming a goat bleated the goddess's name. Poseidon's flashy wave fountain, useful for, well, looking dramatic, and Athena's humble leaf-tickled twig, which already had villagers crushing fruit and smearing the results behind their ears. In truth, it was more ceremonial than electoral. A handful of aristocrats, priests, and maybe a few influential elders nodded in quiet agreement after weighing the gifts. The symbolism was powerful. Athena's olive tree wasn't just a plant, it was a lifestyle. It's being used to describe people with good judgment. "She's of Athena's branch," one woman says, pointing at a friend who just bartered a great price on eggs. No one wants salty water, but no one wants to anger at God either. There are whispers in the hills. Small farming families, more attuned to the sea than the soil, quietly grumble. A landowner is complaining about regulations. "They say my trees are sacred," he huffs, "but the taxes aren't divine." But what counts as sacred? That's the million drachma question. And the answer, of course, depends on who you know in the city council. Some blame the goddess for their misfortunes, droughts, failed harvests, wild goats eating their seedlings. Superstition makes for slippery politics. He carries a scroll, a wax tablet, and the unmistakable aura of someone who takes leaves very seriously. You ask what the difference is. He shrugs. This one has a better view of the temple. So it's maintained half reverently, like a grumpy uncle you don't invite to parties but still send birthday figs. You walk through the Agra and hear a new phrase floating on the wind, of Athena's branch. Olive trees mean prestige, but they also take up space, and the city is growing. Walls are going up, roads are being laid, and suddenly builders are eyeing groves as future foundations. Owls, Athena's signature bird, are painted on more homes, more pottery, more armor, but also to keep supply in check. If too many people profit from olive oil, the price drops. And when the price drops, temples suffer. Her image graces coins, temples, and murals. You pass a wall painting of her presenting the olive tree, serene and unbothered, while Poseidon scowls in the corner like someone just spoiled his favorite amphora. They reuse cracked jars and save oil for special occasions, funerals, weddings, and muscle cramps. One merchant has fashioned his coin weights in the shape of olive leaves, claiming it brings balance. She's selling oil in tiny flasks shaped like acorns. You buy one mostly for the bottle. She looks like she knows exactly how this all plays out. Hundreds of trees now, maybe thousands, planted by hopeful farmers and opportunistic nobles. Olive oil is flowing. Trade routes are opening. And the roots of Athena's tree are growing deep not just into the soil, but into the laws, the economy, and the very soul of the city. It still only produces a few olives a year. There are small altars popping up with olives stacked carefully beside them, like sacred trail mix. The priest nods solemnly and says, "She sees." Gnarled and quiet. Priests light incense at its roots, and children dare each other to touch the bark. None ever do. Whether it does or not, the idea catches on. Poseidon, meanwhile, is still sulking. The salt spring bubbles mournfully beneath a stone arch now, sealed off except during festivals. The gods give, he says, but they don't give without watching. That statement echoes in your mind as you pass another official arguing with a farmer over how many olives he's allowed to press this season. But here's the twist. Not everyone is thrilled about Athena winning. You overhear a tense conversation in a shaded courtyard. That's right, sacred olive trees? Exempt from cutting and from taxation. Historians still debate whether this vague definition was intentional, a way to control agricultural output while rewarding political allies, or just a divine oversight from a goddess too busy inventing armor and wisdom to worry about zoning laws. You trailed behind an Athenian inspector and a Pimalite tasked with surveying state olives. He points at one tree. "That's protected," he mutters. Then another. "That one's probably not." Fair enough. It becomes clear that the people are trying to thread a line between reverence and real estate. But Athena's presence is now baked into the city's identity. You pause at the new temple still under construction and watch a stonemason carve her likeness. One priest tells you between ladlefuls of lentil stew that the olive tree is more than a gift, it's a reminder. Yes, that's right, limits. Athenian leaders have begun enforcing production controls on sacred groves. To protect the trees, they say. To prevent abuse, you start to notice a class divide forming. The wealthy store oil in ornate amphorae with wax seals and family crests. The poor. And always the question hovers, who really owns the tree? The landowner? The state? The goddess? One woman in the market has a theory. No one owns a tree, she says, but everyone wants to. In the midst of all this, the old Moria tree still stands. And the funniest part? That tree, the one gifted by a goddess, the one that launched 1,000 regulations, debates, and market stalls? The rest of the city? What started as a quiet gift has become the central pillar of identity. You lean against a warm stone wall and watch a young boy pick up a fallen olive, look around sheepishly, and hand it to a nearby priest. And just like that, the myth keeps growing. By now, it's clear. Athens is in the grip of a full-blown olive oil obsession. You wake up to the sound of clay jars clinking and the smell of crushed olives wafting through the morning air. It's harvest season. Everywhere you look, people are bustling, climbing ladders, beating branches with sticks, catching the fruit in nets. Even the goats look annoyed that their usual napping trees are crawling with sweaty humans. What began as a divine gift has become a booming industry. And not just for the wealthy elite, everyone's trying to get a piece of the action. Farmers are expanding groves, merchants are stockpiling amphorae, and potters are racing to keep up with demand. One man brags that his family's entire courtyard is now filled with nothing but oil jars and 2 confused chickens. But the real magic happens at the press. The top layer, the virgin oil, is the good stuff, bright, fragrant, and good for just about everything. This year, he tells you, we'll export to Corinth, maybe even Syracuse. He notices your stare and grins. Don't look so shocked, he says. Even Athena would cut corners if she had bills to pay. He beams. Olive oil is gold, but tastier. Next, they'll be frying squid in it, one man moans. Others worry the sacred trees are being neglected or worse, exploited under the guise of commerce. Historians still debate whether these criticisms were rooted in genuine religious concern or just ancient gatekeeping. So real, in fact, that new inspectors are appointed oil testers, essentially whose job is to verify the quality and origin of exported product. They taste, sniff, and sometimes just judge based on vibes and labels. One argues for a temporary restriction on new plantings to preserve soil. The other waves him off, muttering something about the goddess will provide. You get the impression the goddess might not agree. You meet one such inspector who tells you the difference between true Athenian oil and bog water in a bottle is subtle but crucial. One of the grinding beams splits clean in half, donkey flees. Olives go everywhere. It smells amazing, but the damage is real. Therein curses, then quickly lights incense and offers a prayer to Athena. A young student at the academy argues that Athena's gift wasn't the oil, but the discipline it takes to grow and use it wisely. We are not honored by abundance, he says, squinting into the sun. We are honored by restraint. You nod politely and pretend not to notice he's carrying a very expensive oil flask. You think you see the statue roll its eyes. Younger trees are being harvested too early, and older trees are neglected after their prime. And a group of children slipping and sliding across a small spill near the baths. One yells, Athena's revenge, before landing flat on his back. Land that once grew barley or grazed goats is being converted to monoculture. Everyone wants in on the boom, but no one's thinking long-term, not even the officials, the lower layers. Muddier, but still useful for lamps or medicinal pastes. Waste not, want not, even if it smells vaguely like disappointment. You follow the scent to a stone building near the outskirts of the city. Inside, a donkey walks in endless circles, pulling a wooden beam that grinds heavy stones against a basin filled with crushed olives. Couples give small jars as wedding gifts. Priests anoint statues with it. Athletes coat themselves before competitions, then scrape it off afterward and sell the oily mixture as a kind of souvenir. You pick up a vial labeled Genuine Olympic Sweat and decide you don't want to know. By this point in Athenian history, olive oil is being traded across the Mediterranean. Ships packed with jars sail to Egypt, Phoenicia, and southern Italy. The jars themselves, usually stamped with the city's insignia, become a kind of passport. Athenian oil is a mark of quality. It's slow, sticky, and slightly hypnotic. The floor is slick with oil and the occasional shoe print, slippery enough to earn a few bruised backsides and an annoyed priest mumbling about divine irony. The oil is collected and poured into large clay vessels where it's left to settle. As you wander through the press house, you meet a merchant named Theron who's proud of his operation. He isn't wrong. Naturally, that leads to counterfeits. You stumble into a small alley shop where a man is pouring cheaper, locally pressed oil into amphorae marked with Athens owl. Fraud becomes a real problem. Of course, not everyone appreciates the expansion. Old-school citizens grumble that olive oil was meant for holy rituals, not profit. The philosophical crowd has their own takes. But there's no stopping the wave. Olive oil is now more than food or fuel, it's a cultural symbol. And yet, the industry is beginning to outpace the supply. Groves are being pushed to their limits. You overhear a debate between two city councilors. That's when the olive press starts to creak. Not metaphorically, literally. You're back at Theron's workshop when a loud crack echoes through the stone building. Sorry, no offense intended, he mutters, tossing a few unripe olives onto the shrine. The lesson is becoming clear. Even divine gifts need balance. You walk back through the city at sunset, passing homes glowing with olive oil lamps. Families dipping bread into shallow bowls. The city smells like olives. The future tastes like olives. And yet, beneath it all, there's the first whisper of something unsustainable. Athens is thriving, but maybe, just maybe, it's pressing too hard. You're crouched beside a squat, square structure just outside the city's eastern gate. It's dark inside, cool and heavy with the scent of crushed fruit and wet clay. This is an early olive press, and as you watch it in action, you can't help but think this entire process is astonishingly messy. Olives, you see, are not naturally generous. You have to bully them a bit. First, workers crush them pits and all using massive stone rollers. Then they scoop the oily paste into woven baskets. These are stacked in columns and pressed under heavy beams, weighted down with rocks or muscle until the golden liquid oozes out like slow sunshine. The city's economy hums with amphorae, cork stoppers, pottery workshops, and shipping contracts. Export networks snake across the Aegean, and traders come back with stories of Athenians being annoyingly smug about how good their oil is. Every drop is hard-earned. They seal the jars with wax, slap an owl symbol on it, and ship it off to unsuspecting buyers in Rhodes or Ephesus. You trail a boy named Nikos who's been hauling baskets since dawn. You peek inside one. It's crowded, loud, and slightly intimidating. Scroll-wielding officials scribble notes while workers pour, press, and whisper nervously. Everything is tallied. Everything is weighed. His hands are stained greenish-black, and he tells you without a hint of sarcasm that he dreams of a day when he owns his own donkeys. Does an owl's left eye make it less holy? He grumbles, then promptly knocks over a row of misfired amphorae. Not the whole press, he clarifies, just the donkeys. You never have to push a donkey. You only have to wait. These men are trained to sniff, shake, and if needed taste suspicious cargo. You meet one named Thalos who proudly tells you he once caught a batch of amphorae filled with goat fat and dye. Looked perfect, he says. Smelled like an armpit. Like a USDA sticker, but with more gods involved. Smart kid. You wander into a grove near the southern wall and see trees with limp branches, their bark scarred and patchy. She's using lamp oil thick, bitter, and meant for burning. And with that expansion has come an equally impressive spread of rules, loopholes, inspections, and scams. She shrugs. If it doesn't kill us, it cooks fine. She stirs a pot of lentils with the resigned grace of someone who's made peace with disappointment. Too many olives, too fast, mutters a farmer. These trees need years, not seasons. He gestures to a stump. A woman hums while collecting fallen olives into a basket lined with cloth. A young couple carves their initials into the bark of a tree they were not technically allowed to touch. Rations are given as payment to rowers in the Navy, to the poor as part of public welfare, even to jurors in the courts. A reminder that even the messiest miracles start with a leaf, a bit of light, and some stubborn roots. You watch an elderly woman sniff a small jar and nod with satisfaction. They gave us the good stuff this week. But you can't help but wonder if somewhere she's watching the chaos unfold and thinking, I gave them peace and shade. They gave me import tariffs. This one gave everything, and now she's dust. By now, Athens is producing olive oil on a scale few imagined when Athena planted her little miracle twig. Levies are placed on bulk shipments, and soon you hear about traders trying to sneak jars out through back roads or falsify cargo lists. One poor sailor is caught with oil jars filled with, of all things, gravel. But with growth comes the ancient cousin of innovation, fraud. You first notice it when a local merchant named Mester offers you a taste test. Try this, he says, handing you a slice of bread soaked in oil. It's good, smooth, grassy, with a little bite. Then he hands you another, darker sample. Imported, he says. Mixed with fish oil, don't ask. Turns out, not all olive oil is created equal. Some sellers are thinning it with animal fats, old oil, or even colored water. Historians still argue whether this olive oil forgery was limited to a few shady merchants or whether it became an open secret. A wink-wink sort of crime that only got punished when trade partners complained. Athens responds by rolling out inspections. Oil bound for export has to be processed at designated state presses, often near temples. The state doesn't just want good oil, it wants trackable oil. You see the beginnings of official amphora stamps, little symbols etched into the clay to certify the origin and quality. Of course, not everyone's impressed. A potter named Irenaeus tells you that once, his jars were rejected because the owl was facing the wrong direction. There's also a tax angle to all this. Olive oil sold domestically, fair game. But exported oil? That's where the city makes its real money. Smuggling becomes so common that Athens hires additional guards at the harbors. Meanwhile, the olive groves themselves are struggling. Overpressing and overharvesting are taking a toll. It's a quiet kind of crisis. Athens doesn't slow down, though. If anything, demand only increases. Oil is now a political commodity. But of course, not all oil is blessed equally. You pass a household where the servant girl is cooking over a small flame. Olive oil has taken over every aspect of Athenian life: lighting, food, medicine, religion, sports, cosmetics. And the goddess? You glance up at one of the temple reliefs where Athena stands tall, olive branch in hand, gaze firm. She looks dignified. And yet, in spite of the cracks, the fraud, the fatigue, people still gather in the groves. Children still chase each other between twisted trunks. There's something sacred still beating beneath all the economics. A reminder that even the messiest miracles start with a leaf, a bit of light, and some stubborn roots. You're standing near the Nix, where the assembly gathers. The sun is high, the shade is scarce, and the conversation has taken a surprisingly botanical turn. Who owns the trees? A voice demands from the crowd. If they're sacred, then the city owns them. If the city owns them, why do I pay the taxes? It's not the first time this argument's come up, and it won't be the last. You see, somewhere between worship and export, Athens stumbled into a problem no one foresaw. The olive tree is both divine and profitable, but I knew a man who lost everything. They said he touched the goddess's property. I say, if the goddess wants to eat it, she can come do it herself. A symbol of the goddess and a piece of state infrastructure. The crowd is divided. Some cry for mercy. Others call for exile. The judge looks like he hasn't slept in days. Eventually, the man is pardoned, but the tree is assigned a priest to watch it more closely. A man from Sparta mutters that if they had an olive crisis, they'd just burn the groves and start over. You're not sure if he's joking. The oil funds temples and public events, but the grove keepers often live on the edge of poverty. To prune carelessly becomes a euphemism for political recklessness. It's not for drinking or cooking, it's for display, sacrifice, status. Offerings to Athena now come in the form of amphorae filled with liquid sunlight. You peek inside one and smell something sharp and pure. The oil almost glows. Not the riotous kind Athens rarely boils all at once, but the quiet kind, a strain in the conversations, a hesitation in the markets. People know something's out of balance, but no one wants to say it out loud. To press bitterly is used when a merchant is caught charging unfair prices. The metaphors are baked into everyday life. The rest trickles down to the people, or to trade, or to storage rooms where it's forgotten and sometimes turns rancid. You find one such jar half hidden in a shadowy alcove and wonder if even divine gifts expire. She whispers a prayer, something about her brother's health, her father's debts, her mother's back pain. She doesn't ask for riches. She asks for resilience. Like the tree. Inspectors fan out across the countryside, tallying trunks and measuring yields. Farmers grumble. A few try to hide trees under canopies or disguise them as fig bush. One clever boy paints the leaves silver to throw off an inspector. A living thread back to that moment on the Acropolis when a goddess knelt, pressed a seed into the soil, and waited. It almost works. It's a system held together with myths and paperwork, and you can sense the cracks forming. Over time, more and more trees were designated as state-protected. Some were planted by the city. He shows you a tree marked with a small stone, an official seal of sacred status. Used to be mine, he says, not bitterly, just tired. Now it's hers. The city sends a man once a year to check it hasn't died. The rest of the time, I still water it, still prune it. But I can't sell the olives without permission, or eat them. A few groves are producing mysteriously high yields, so high, in fact, that scholars later suspect those farmers were importing olives at night just to repress them and sell the oil as local. Others simply stood on private land long enough to be noticed by the wrong official with a wax tablet and too much time. And when something's that valuable, everyone wants control over it and no one agrees on what control means. That sacred tree, the Moria, was only the beginning. You visit a landowner named Diodorus, whose family has tended their olive grove for generations. You ask what happens if he does. He lifts his sleeve and shows you a scar across his wrist. Was lucky. Just a fine and a public warning. Athens has created a strange duality. The trees are sacred, yet the people do all the work. Historians still debate whether this sacred olive bureaucracy was intentionally exploitative or just another example of well-meaning reverence tangled up in the realities of urban growth. You pass a trial on the Agra, yes. A trial where a man is being accused of cutting a branch from a sacred tree to make a walking stick for his aging mother. Even the language around olives is shifting. And let's not forget the foreign observers. Delegations from other cities visit Athens and leave with mixed impressions. Some marvel at the structured economy and religious devotion. Others scoff. Meanwhile, the temples are thriving. At the Parthenon, you see workers pouring oil into massive ceremonial vessels. Priests have begun ranking the oil. The best goes to rituals. And then comes the census. The city launches an official olive count. Every tree, sacred or not, must be registered. The count reveals what many feared. Too much oil, too little oversight. Smuggling is up. Fraud is harder to trace. You start to feel a tension rising in the city. Athena's gift was meant to bring peace, but the pressure of managing that gift has become anything but peaceful. Still, the trees endure. You visit a grove at dawn and watch as a young girl lays flowers at the base of one. And maybe that's what Athena really offered beneath all the bureaucracy and trade, not just oil or olives, but a lesson in endurance. These trees take years to bear fruit. They survive fire, drought, war. They grow where others can't. Their roots twist through stone, stubborn and silent. You press your hand against the bark of one and feel it rough, dry, ancient, not for applause, not for temples, just to see what would grow. The city smells different now, richer, greasier, a little more competitive. You wake to the shop's scent of oil being warmed in bronze pans, sizzling with garlic and onion. Somewhere a merchant is already shouting about first press, cold press. Goddess blessed. As if each drop were squeezed directly from Athena's own hands. Athenian cuisine, once dominated by grains, figs, and whatever the sea coughed up, is now drenched, sometimes literally, in olive oil. You follow your nose through the morning markets, past vendors dabbing oil onto cheese, dried fish, even desserts. Housewives boast about their spring pressing, men argue over varietals, and children sneak bread ends just to dip into the leftover oil after meals. Recipes once passed down in whispers now include bragging rights. My great-grandmother's lentils, but with fresh oil. There's a street cook flamboyantly pouring a green stream over grilled octopus, declaring, "This is what victory tastes like." One is infused with thyme and citrus peel. Another with powdered rose petals. One poor servant is assigned to stand by the amphora and fan it gently with a peacock feather to keep it cool. You try a bite. He's not wrong. Cooking has become a theatrical act. The olive oil arms race is on. The loser must eat the dish without salt. The winner gets applause, a laurel wreath, and a flask of imported Egyptian cumin oil as a prize. Even olive oil is becoming a status symbol. The poor still press theirs with cracked stones and fermenting baskets. A woman named Al-Kip, who runs a small food stall near the temple steps, tells you flatly, the oil was meant for light, for healing, for bread, not for ego. What's clear, though, is that food and politics are once again tangled up in the olive branch. She hands you a skewer of grilled mushrooms and adds, but it does taste better this way. The rich, they import Sicilian olives, hire professional tasters, and throw oil-pouring contests at dinner parties. Where once meals were dry and mealy, now they're tender, glistening, complex. Dishes last longer. Bread softens. Leftovers actually exist. It's changing how people cook, how they share, and even how they think about hospitality. They've pooled their scraps and oil rations to roast chickpeas and sweet leeks. Someone plays a lyre. Someone else tells a racy joke about Poseidon slipping on a spilled amphora. Everyone laughs, full and golden with oil and starlight. Amphorae are lined up like soldiers, each filled with temple-certified olive oil. The leaves rustle above you, flashing silver in the dark. Somewhere nearby, someone is frying fish. You can smell it. And you can't help but think, they may not press the finest oil, but they use it, carefully, reverently, deliciously. A mother rubbing a sore ankle. A grandmother anointing a baby. A cook dousing lentils while muttering a blessing. It's in your skin, your mouth, your home. The poor line up eagerly, clutching baskets and jars. Officials hand them out with pomp, speeches, and many, many owls stamped on everything. Also faintly like soap. When they oil their lamps with perfume, the end is near. You're not sure if he's joking. And naturally, the elite take it too far. You find yourself at a banquet hosted by a wealthy official and archon who insists on showing off his latest luxury, flavored olive oil. These public oil gifts serve multiple purposes. They honor the goddess, yes, it's beautiful and just a bit controlled. But they also buy political favor, keep citizens fed, and gently remind everyone who's really in charge of the oil. It tastes extravagant. Across the table, a philosopher rolls his eyes and mutters. There's a growing divide in the city between the old ways, simple oil for sacred lamps, ritual, and subsistence, and this new wave of culinary one-upmanship. Yes, really, you see one. Two men compete to see who can pour the thinnest stream of oil onto a pile of roasted barley without breaking the flow. The crowd cheers. Someone drops a chicken drumstick into the oil, eats it, and faints in joy. Not everyone's thrilled with this trend, and she's right. The oil is transforming Athenian food not just in flavor, but in form. Historians still debate whether this culinary boom created wider food access for the poor or if it simply widened the culinary gap between classes. Take the public festivals. You attend one in honor of Athena, a citywide celebration with games, parades, and free oil distributions. It's generous, but not entirely altruistic. One young man whispers, "The only thing more sacred than the oil is who gets to give it away." You watch as elders bless the amphory, children dance in olive leaf crowns, and someone lights 100 lamps using nothing but temple oil and one very determined spark. Later, you stumble upon a back alley feast hosted by a group of artisans. This is the other side of Athens, the part that Athena inscribed in marble but pulses in the hands of bakers, potters, and midwives. And as for the oil itself, it's becoming more than a food. It's a flavor, a texture, a memory. You recall a line from a temple priest overheard weeks ago: "The goddess gave us light, but we chose taste." You lie back under a moonlit olive tree that night, belly full, skin warm, mind spinning with oil and laughter. This is exactly what the gods feared and hoped for at once. You wake to shouting, not the angry kind, but the kind that always follows money. Down by the docks, Athenian traders are unloading another ship of amphory. They move fast, barking counts, checking stamps, marking symbols on wet planks. Each jar is painted with an owl, an olive twig, or if you squint, a slightly wonky Athena wearing what might be sunglasses. Okay, maybe not sunglasses. But it's clear someone got creative with temple branding. This is the sharp edge of the olive oil empire, commerce. Athens is no longer just producing oil for itself. It's exporting it across the Mediterranean, and not quietly. They pay triple, he boasts, if you mention Athena. He pats one of the jars like it's a beloved child. This one smells like loyalty. Athenian olive oil is considered elite premium stuff, the kind nobles in Ephesus or merchants in Carthage pay extra for. A third smells faintly of fish, you don't ask. Not because it's necessarily better, but because of what it represents: culture, intelligence, goddess-approved sophistication. Some even come with tiny parchment tags describing flavor notes. A map lies on a table, pebbled with wax markers showing shipments to Egypt, Cyprus, Italy, and even further west. "We don't just trade oil," says one silver-haired speaker, "we trade trust." Where Athenian oil flows, Athenian culture follows. They name their children after philosophers. The oil is a kind of cultural Trojan horse, delicious, slippery, and hard to resist. One says, earthy with a touch of mountain air. Another claims it was harvested at dawn during temple prayers. These aren't random clay pots. They're part of the visual economy. Amphorae are tall, narrow, and perfectly stackable on ships. They're marked with weights, destinations, and sometimes the names of the officials who approved them. The idea of an olive oil scandal spreads fast, and soon officials are proposing new oversight measures. The trader insists the jars were tampered with after they left port. To protect the city's sacred groves and ensure long-term exports, there's talk of limiting how much oil can be pressed, stored, or sold privately. Overpressing weakens them. Some groves near the coast are turning gray and brittle. Ships bob gently in the harbor, sails rippling like parchment pages. Below you, hundreds, maybe thousands of amphorae are being loaded, packed with care and hope and bureaucracy. Soil erosion is becoming visible. And in the hills, smaller farmers are being squeezed out, forced to sell to larger estates or move to the city. Some call it the beginning of the first olive oil ban. Saltwater got in, he claims. Poseidon's mischief. Repeat offenders are denied export permits or, in some cases, publicly shamed in the Agora. One man is forced to wear an amphora on his head for a day with the word "diluted" scrawled on it in charcoal. A street cook tosses olives in a pan and sprinkles sea salt with the flair of a temple priest. Kids follow him, laughing. One yells, "Hey, got any half-off oil?" Nervous. A bit much, but it sells. And because Athens has figured out something most ancient cities haven't: branding. You see amphorae lined up at the harbor, each carefully labeled with origin marks, press dates, and stylized stamps of state approval. You trail a merchant named Callias as he prepares a shipment bound for Rhodes. There's a reason these jars are so recognizable. Athens has developed standard forms for its oil vessels, both for local use and long-distance shipping. Historians still debate whether this early packaging system was pioneered by the temple administrators or the port traders, but either way, it worked. You walk through a warehouse where rejected jars are stacked like ancient Lego bricks. One has a hairline crack, another was too light, likely short on oil. But the Athenian olive oil trade isn't just about logistics, it's about power. You attend a council session where trade routes are being discussed. And it's true. Alongside the amphory come scrolls, statuettes, poems, gossip. People buy the oil and start quoting Homer. They wear Athenian tunics, not that it's all smooth sailing. You sit in on a merchant arbitration, essentially a trial where a buyer from Thrace accuses an Athenian trader of watering down his shipment. The judge raises an eyebrow, or your greed. In the end, they split the penalty, but the incident raises eyebrows in the council. That's when you first hear the term, ban list. The city-state has begun keeping a record of merchants caught engaging in olive oil fraud, but even more controversial, the whispers of a state-controlled quota system. You hear a merchant shout, "What next?" Rations? Restrictions on bread dips? His amphora shatters dramatically. No one claps. Still, the pressures are real. Trees take years to mature. You climb up to a watchtower overlooking the coast. And just beneath the surface? That quiet question, how long can a tree-fed empire grow before the roots start to fray? You walk back down into the city as the sun dips. Oil lamps flicker to life. Athens smells rich tonight. But it also smells nervous. You hear it first in murmurs. The trees are dying. At first, you think it's just farmer gossip, harvest woes, the usual grumbling. But as you wander further into the countryside, past rows of olives once thick with silvery leaves, the whispers solidify into something more troubling. A grove near the Ilissos River is nearly bare. The trunks are hollowed, the soil cracked and pale. One old man pokes the ground with a stick and shakes his head. "It's the curse," he mutters. "Too much taken, too little given." Decades of aggressive harvesting, poor soil management, and relentless expansion have left many groves exhausted. The land isn't resting. The trees aren't healing. And now even the most sacred branches are withering. You crouch beside one of the trees and run your fingers along its bark. It crumbles like stale bread. Athens, it seems, is running on borrowed roots. Entire sectors of the economy revolve around this golden liquid. Storage, transport, exports, taxes, festivals, food, military payments, public welfare. When the oil stops, a lot more stops with it. Olive trees are hardy, famously so, but even they have limits. And that's a big problem. Because Athens isn't just an olive oil consumer anymore, it's an olive oil machine. You taste one flask that's clearly cut with pine sap. One guest whispers, "My skin smells like fear." No one laughs. A trader shrugs and says, "It's still flammable. What more do you want?" You return to the Agra where a heated debate is underway. Ceremonies are held before the first olive is picked. Young men in white robes chant prayers while circling the groves. Just enough for their household. Hidden presses are built beneath homes, disguised as wine cellars. You visit one. The oil is rough, smoky, full of twigs, but it's oil. People murmur but don't riot yet. The sick are prioritized. Then soldiers, then priests. Everyone else waits. Or goes without. The smell is acrid and clings to your clothes. The mother there shrugs, then offers you a piece of bread soaked in vinegar. "We used to have oil," she says. "Now we have stories about it." It feeds them, it heals them. It gives them hope. You attend one. It's beautiful, slow, fragrant, moonlit, but you notice a small pile of dropped olives that no one dares touch. One speaker cries, "We've turned the goddess's gift into a curse." Another demands tighter planting laws. A third, in a robe far too clean for a farmer, says the problem isn't the trees, it's the farmers themselves. Things are getting political fast. One wants to do it, one refuses. The third says, "Let the goddess decide," and walks away. You're not sure if it's symbolic or practical. Probably both. In one version, Poseidon doesn't just lose, he curses the tree out of spite. A city that once celebrated the abundance of oil now clings to the idea that less might be more. Some embrace the shift, calling it a return to reverence. Others resent it, muttering that a divine gift shouldn't come with so many rules. In another, Athena regrets her gift entirely. People are projecting their fears onto the myth, reshaping it like wet clay. Still revered. City officials begin holding emergency meetings about oil security. They order new plantings, enforce stricter grove regulations, and quietly begin stockpiling high-quality oil in sealed amphorae beneath the temples just in case. The flame is gentle, flickering, soft against the wind. It smells like warmth, like history, like memory. One amphora is labeled "For Athena's table only." Historians still argue whether this oil crisis marked the start of real environmental awareness in ancient Athens, or if it was simply economic self-preservation wrapped in a leafy disguise. Either way, you see the effects everywhere. Merchants are panicking, prices rise. Counterfeits flood the market. Even the rich feel it. At a symposium hosted by a prominent general, the oil for massaging guests is replaced with grain wine. Meanwhile, the temples launch a new campaign. Respect the roots. They preach restraint, moderation, and ritualized harvests. Later that night, you catch a boy sneaking back with a basket. Some families, especially in the hills, have started pressing olives in secret. Back in the city, public rations are reduced. Oil distributions at festivals are cut in half. You pass a home where the lamps are filled with animal fat instead. And even stories are starting to change. You notice that retellings of the great contest between Athena and Poseidon are growing darker. A wandering bard sings a new line. From olive gold to ghostly gray, Athena weeps the price we pay. Children repeat it, over and over. You sit beneath what was once a vibrant grove and watch as 3 farmers argue about whether to chop down the oldest tree for firewood. The others sit in silence. Athens is at a tipping point. And the oil itself? Still beautiful, still useful. But scarcer, slipperier, a little bit sad. You lit a small clay lamp that night with a spoonful of sacred oil, one of the last you will see for a while. And as it burns, you can't help but wonder, if a gift costs everything, was it ever a gift at all? The decree is read aloud at dawn. In the shadow of the Acropolis, an official with a voice like gravel announces what the city has quietly feared, effective immediately. New restrictions will be placed on olive oil production, export, and distribution. The goddess, it seems, is getting a new rulebook. They call it the Protection Act, but on the street, people just call it the ban. No more planting new groves without state approval. No more pressing oil without permits. No more private sales of sacred tree olives. Someone mutters, so we can praise the gift but not use it. Another adds, they've turned a tree into a jailer. Amphorae not bearing a temple mark are considered contraband. And worst of all, no exporting oil during festival weeks. You, along with the rest of the crowd, stare at the proclamation nailed to the side of a granary. The tension is thick. Presses are shuttered. Donkeys stand idle. Merchants scratch their heads over broken contracts. A woman who ran a 2-jar stall in the Agra now sells vinegar and regrets. Athena wanted peace, she tells you. This feels like punishment. Like no dogs in the baths or respect the amphora weight limits. You make your way through the city and notice the small, immediate changes. He says it's richer, riskier. You try a taste. It's smooth, daring, and possibly cursed. In the other, Shadow Athens presses, trades, and even drinks oil under cover of night. A young priestess tells you that for too long, oil was treated like a mere product. It should be earned, she says. Not squeezed from the earth like it owes us something. She lights her lamp with a single drop and closes her eyes in prayer. It's beautiful. It's also barely enough to see by. They speak in hushed tones about the new rules. One sighs and says, the gods gave us fruit. The city gave us rules. It's the poor, those who grew, picked, pressed, and carried the oil, who now must stretch lamp rations and cook with leftover grease from last week's beans. Now they're dug up. Or worse, left to dry out, abandoned under the sun. The air smells like dust, not hope. They tell us not to export it, he says, but every jar we don't sell, Corinth does. They hum while they work. Their hands are practiced, their voices calm. When they finish, the girl dips her finger into the oil and touches it to her grandmother's forehead. A third simply sighs and says, it's just oil. We've forgotten that it's just oil. Every amphora we hide, Egypt floods the docks with their own. Just leaves rustling in the wind and one old owl perched silently on a branch. A mirror, maybe. Showing Athens exactly how much it's built politically, spiritually, and economically on a liquid born of patience, pressure, and time. You light a lamp with oil pressed in secret and watch the flame flicker low and long. We've protected the goddess so well, we've given her throne to others. Which should I obey? Another snorts and says, whichever one feeds you. But this isn't just about oil. This is about control. It's trying to balance commerce, faith, ecology, and pride, and the math isn't working. You listen to a speech by a statesman who declares, let us not be known as the city that burned its own roots. Inside one amphora? The unmistakable scent of pure first-press olive oil. From Marathon, he says, eyes gleaming. 20 drams if you keep quiet. The audience claps politely, then goes home to eat dry bread. Athens is trying to solve a crisis while protecting a myth. Meanwhile, the black market blooms. You follow a boy down a narrow alley lined with storage jars disguised as fish brine. Another seller offers festival oil, so named because it is illegally pressed during the banned weeks. Historians still argue whether this ban was enforced with strict penalties or turned into yet another example of huff, Athenian flexibility, one of those laws that everyone acknowledges but no one follows completely. But one thing is clear, the olive oil ban creates two cities. In one, public, legal Athens continues to light its lamps with temple oil, distribute rations, and speak poetically about restraint. You sit with a group of farmers just outside the city walls. To some, the ban is seen as a return to holiness. But others see the ban as hypocrisy. The wealthy still host feasts, still rub themselves in perfumed oils, still trade discreetly with select clients. You meet a sailor named Manon who laughs bitterly when you ask about oil. A group of scholars gathers in a quiet symposium to discuss the ban. One declares it a sacred necessity. Another calls it economic suicide. And yet, there's something undeniably tragic about this moment. You walk through a field where young olive saplings were once planted in neat rows. But not everything is wilting. In a small courtyard, you watch a girl and her grandmother using old fabric scraps to strain oil from fermented paste, what little they could harvest. Athena sees, she whispers. You ask the grandmother if she's afraid of breaking the law. She smiles. The law feeds the city, she says. But the tree feeds the people. That night, you sit beneath a familiar grove. It's quieter now, no tools, no shouting. The oil ban may have started as protection, but it's become something more complicated. And now, without it flowing freely, the cracks are starting to show. It begins like most revolutions, do not with a shout, but with a silence. The presses are still. The markets speak in hushed tones. For the first time in decades, the scent of olive oil no longer rises with the morning. The city feels thinner, not broken, but stretched. Like too little oil rubbed over too much bread. And yet, despite the bans, despite the inspections, the amphorae keep moving. You follow a cart under cover of night, no markings. No guards, just two teenagers whispering about a delivery for the Hill House. She has a rash, it soothes her skin. Inside, hidden beneath old blankets and layers of grape pulp, are 4 small jugs of unapproved olive oil. They just remember. The real stuff. Harvested by hand. Pressed in a shed. Smuggled past 3 checkpoints. This one's for the baby, one of them says. That's the reality now. The goddess's gift has become contraband. You sit in the corner, pretending to be a sleepy apprentice, and listen to the same old refrains. But it's not all doom. Not yet, not about trade or taxes, but about moments. First harvest. First kisses under a tree. A stolen meal dipped in oil on a war march. A widow who kept her family alive through a long winter with just a half jar hidden behind amphorae of vinegar. But either way, a new phase begins, quiet rebalancing. You stumble across a small square at dusk where elders sit in a circle telling olive stories. Temple presses begin working again, but with smaller quotas and older hands. Farmers are invited to rituals again. Young people are trained in slow pressing techniques, taught that not every olive must be wrung dry. You sit with them and listen. No one complains about the ban. No one praises it either. Because olive oil, you realize, was never just about flavor or commerce. It was about continuity. A liquid thread connecting family to field, gods to gardens, dinner tables to divine temples. Not of Athena standing tall and victorious, but of her kneeling hands in the dirt planting the first seed. Even stitched into the robes of some radical temple reformers who call themselves the rooted. Poets recite verses in the Agra about patience, decay, and regrowth. One particularly poignant line becomes a catchphrase. No more pretending that rules will fix what relationships broke. No more pretending that a tree answers to laws. New leaves twitch in the wind. Tiny olives gleam like green teardrops. Bees hum low and warm. Children are playing again. You hear laughter under the branches. Athens is trying to reweave that thread, but its hands are tied. In the Areopagus, the city council debates new policies. If we don't control it, we lose it. If we don't protect it, we spoil it. If we don't export it, we starve. We don't need more oil, she says. We need more meaning in the oil we already have. He pours just enough oil to coat the wick, then kneels and whispers, "Thank you for letting us wait." Her followers walk from grove to grove, blessing the trees, educating farmers, helping build compost beds and shade awnings. One voice, clear and cracked with age, finally says, "If we don't trust each other, no jar will ever hold enough." They're resting, rerooting, like the groves. Messy abundance of its olive heyday, you also know this. It doesn't need to. And for a moment there's silence. Historians still argue whether the events that follow were deliberate policy shifts or the slow erosion of impossible rules. Oil becomes rarer, yes, but also more valued. A single flask might pass through 10 hands before reaching a buyer. Each adds a little story, a mark, a blessing. The state reopens select groves under supervised sustainability models. And the most surprising change? The city stops pretending. No more pretending that oil can be endlessly sacred and endlessly profitable. Instead, Athens begins a campaign of stories. Murals appear across the city. Let the oil slow that the tree may grow. It's carved into lamp bases, painted on tavern walls. You meet one, a woman named Syra, who speaks in soft tones but has fierce eyes. Some call them saints, others call them nuisances. Either way, the soil begins to heal. You walk the outer groves now, and something is different. The trees still tired, still scarred seem alive again. The economy adapts too. A midwife tells you she rubbed her hands with it before delivering twins. A soldier says he poured a drop into his helmet before battle. A widow keeps her husband's last gift, a sealed jar, on her shelf, unopened, glowing. The olive oil ban, it turns out, didn't break Athens. It revealed Athens, what mattered. What endured. You return one evening to the temple steps and find a boy lighting a ceremonial lamp. The flame flickers. The wind stirs. The city breathes. You smile and walk back through the streets, which are quieter now, but not hollow. And though you know Athens will never return to the wild, because somewhere out there, in the golden dusk, a tree is still growing. You return to the Acropolis at dawn, and the city below looks older than usual. Not broken, not forgotten, just lived in. Like a scroll that's been written on too many times, not gallons of it. Just a single amphora. A ceremonial offering placed near the statue of Athena, with lines of hope, lines of grief, and lines that trail off in the middle because someone ran out of ink. The Parthenon's columns are warm with morning light, and as you walk past its base, you catch a smell you haven't smelled here in months: fresh olive oil. Not with fanfare, not as spectacle. Just placed. Athens is trying to say thank you and sorry in the same breath. The oil inside glows amber in the light, and beside it a small clay tablet reads, "Some areas are still barren, but others are thriving." You walk with a grove keeper named Elian, who shows you new shoots coming up around old trunks. The resulting liquid is thick, cloudy, and smells like pepper and grass. They pour it into a small clay jug, seal it with wax, and place it in the center of a stone circle, not like before. The oil doesn't inspire frenzy anymore. It's not about wealth or prestige. It's not even about sacred duty. It's their way, he says. Fall down, grow sideways, try again, for the seed we forgot and the tree we remembered. Not in waves, not in fanfare, but in pulses. It's not an official decree. It's not state-sanctioned poetry. It's something else, a quiet admission. One drop, one prayer, she tells her customers. A boy rubs a dab into a scratch on his knee and winces, but doesn't cry. A potter etches olive trees onto her wares, not lush forests, but gnarled, defiant ones with roots that twist like questions. A guideline, a cautionary echo. Was it improved farming techniques? A shift in cultural values? A cooling of demand? Or simply time letting everything settle the way sediment settles in a quiet jar? And below, across the city, oil is returning. The presses are back on, but they spin slower now. Groves are pruned carefully, not hungrily, just a few dozen. Carefully sealed, clearly labeled. One even has a handwritten note, from a grove that rests every 3rd year. His father lost a whole harvest during the worst of the ban. But now, we'll press this batch in silence, Elian says. No parties. Just thanks. You watch them press the oil by hand, slowly, like they're coaxing it instead of commanding it. No one speaks. The wind rustles the trees. That's the strange thing. No one's celebrating. In one version, Athena plants the tree twice, once for the people, once for the earth. In another, Poseidon returns to help her tend the roots. It's about balance. You walk the agora and see olive oil being used again, but in smaller bowls, with thinner streams. A woman sells lamp oil by the drop. No contest to see who can fry fish with the fanciest oil, but maybe, just maybe, she is. Children wearing crowns of real olive twigs, not dipped in gold, just green and bending and real. About not needing more just because you could have more. You try a slice of bread dipped in a 3-year aged oil. It tastes earthy, bitter, warm, like something that waited a long time to be tasted. The wick catches slowly, hesitates, then flares to life. You can feel it in the language too. People don't talk about abundance anymore. They talk about enough. 1 amphora, 1 grove. 1 lamp, enough. And the ban? It's still technically in place, in pieces. But it's softer now, less about fear, more about memory. Historians still debate what finally ended the olive oil crisis. The answer, as usual, is yes, all of it, and none of it. Because oil is simple, but people never are. You sit at the port again, watching a shipment of new amphorae being loaded, not thousands like before. You ask the sailor what's changed. He smiles and says, we stopped racing the tree. And it's not just trade or ritual that's adjusting. The mythology is evolving too. New versions of the Athena verses. Poseidon tale are popping up, whispered by street performers and retold by children in back alleys. The rivalry is turning into a partnership. You hear one poem where the olive tree speaks. I was never yours to win or wield. I only asked you not to forget the soil. It gives you chills. You stroll through an olive festival, yes, they're back, but smaller now, more local. No grand amphorae giveaways, instead there are storytelling circles. Pressing demonstrations. One girl asks you, do you think Athena is proud of us again? You don't answer out loud. Because this isn't about oil anymore. It's about what the oil taught them, about patience, about recovery. Athens still shines. But now it shines slower, gentler, and as the sun lowers behind the rooftops, you pass a courtyard where someone is lighting a lamp. The oil glows amber, soft, steady, it's enough. The night air is warm and Athens breathes easier than it has in years. You walk through a narrow street where light spills softly from open windows. Inside, families gather around simple meals, bread, olives, lentils, and just a touch of oil. They talk about seasons, about rain, about which trees bore fruit and which ones didn't. The oil has become local again, personal again. It's part of daily life, not the center of it. Not soaked, not glistening. Just present like a quiet guest who knows when to stay silent. No one talks about the glory days of overflowing amphorae anymore. And that may be the greatest transformation of all. Keeps the skin soft, she says, and the thread behaves. Her oil comes from her sister's grove. They trade jugs for fabric once a year, no coins exchanged, just trust. Because olive oil is no longer a symbol of Athenian dominance, it's become a symbol of care. And how children now learn to press olives as a craft, not just a chore. And how the trees themselves seem taller, more dignified. As if they've forgiven Athens a little. You sit with a weaver named Ianthe who shows you how she coats her fingers with a drop of oil before threading her loom. It should be rare, says one. Or it stops meaning anything. You nod and you think back to a time when those same steps were slippery with excess. There are still exports, still amphorae, still markets. But the city now favors smaller shipments, clearer labeling, ethical grove management. We don't sell oil, one merchant says with a wink. We lease grace. He admits between bites of roasted eggplant that he was wrong. The oil was too easy, he says. And when things are too easy, we stop thinking. In another home, a grandmother is teaching her grandson how to light a lamp, not with urgency, but with ceremony. He hesitates, pours too much, laughs, and wipes it up with his sleeve. A little tag says, for the branch that fed my mother. Too eager, she says gently. The wick only needs a whisper, just one. Bent slightly with a single ripe fruit. Outside the temples, the priests now offer drops of oil instead of jars. Give it back, they say thank you. A few mock them, but others join in. Historians still reflect on this shift as the olive humbling. A cultural pivot from indulgence to intention. Some chalk it up to necessity, others to guilt, a few to divine intervention. But the effect remains. The city has changed its pace. You notice it in how people walk, not rushed, but measured. But almost. A girl is pruning with a curved blade and humming a tune you recognize, something old. A harvest song. She sees you watching, grins, and flicks a tiny olive your way. Art has caught up too. You visit a sculptor named Theon who shows you his latest work, a statue of Athena not with a spear or a shield, but holding a small olive branch. She gave us everything, he says. We almost ruined it. There's no bitterness in his voice, just awe. You savor it when it appears. You don't hoard oil. You remember it. The oil pools gently, the wick catches, and the flame dances quietly, not too bright, not too low. You carry a small vial in your pocket, not for cooking, not for trade, but to remind you of how fragile gifts can be. The olive oil industry hasn't disappeared, it's just recalibrated. It's a joke, but it's also not. You're invited to a twilight meal at the home of a philosopher who was once loudly opposed to the original bans. Now he thinks, so does everyone else. There is even a movement among the youth, teenagers mostly, who collect leftover oil in tiny flasks and leave them at the roots of old trees. You see one of these flasks tied to a sapling in a public square, glinting in the moonlight. And speaking of mothers, yours would have liked this new Athens. Calmer, cleaner, more deliberate. You visit one final grove on the edge of the city where the trees are young and gnarled and full of potential. Not ripe yet, she says, almost. That's where Athens lives now. Not in the fullness, not in the famine, but in the space between. And you've changed too. You don't chase the scent of frying anymore. That night, you light one last lamp before bed. Just right. And as the glow settles across the walls of your room, you realize this isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a better one. You wake to birdsong and the scent of crushed thyme on the breeze. The city stirs slowly. Athens has settled into a rhythm you didn't think possible years ago, somewhere between reverence and routine. There's oil for sale, yes, but just enough. One vendor offers tasting spoons. Another sells wick kits with tiny glass vials of pressed oil labeled with the harvest moon cycle. A kind of collective wisdom built from mistakes. Athens didn't just change policy, it changed pace. A teacher stands nearby, pointing out the way sunlight moves across the bark. See how the roots twist? They tell us where the water used to be. One proudly tells you this batch rested for 2 winters before pressing. The olive trees are no longer icons of endless production or crisis. It's remembering that the goddess gave them a tree, not a miracle. They're trees again. Living things with limits and quiet needs. You step into a small market, now bustling with soft energy. The truth likely lies in the middle, like so much else in the city. You dip bread into a sample, it tastes like dusk. Slightly bitter, deeply comforting. This isn't nostalgia, it's something more grounded. You pass a group of young students sketching in front of a modest grove near the edge of the city. There's a feeling in the air like deep breath before a ritual, calm, full, and deliberate. The trees have become textbooks, not just economic assets. Not just sacred relics, but teachers of patience, growth, and yes, recovery. A child places a fresh olive branch into the hands of Athena's statue. She does it carefully, reverently, not for spectacle, just to say thank you. One wick at a time, he tells a young couple, that's all any of us need. They smile, pay with a few figs, and walk off humming. You walk the grove one last time, hands brushing low branches heavy with olives, not yet harvested, not yet touched. Athens, you realize, has chosen to live in that breath. No longer chasing more, no longer worshipping excess. And they finally learned how to tend it. A philosopher you once overheard railing against olive quotas now runs a tiny lamp stand in the Agora. Historians still wonder whether the olive ban was ever fully repealed or whether it simply faded out, paced by better ideas. There's no grand declaration, no feast to mark the end. Just oil in the lamps again. And beneath that simple light, Athens carries on, wiser, softer, rooted. You sit on the temple steps one last time just as evening falls. The branch shakes slightly in the breeze. You light your last lamp. And let the flames speak the final word. And now, as the story settles and the city grows quiet, let your breath match the rhythm of the flickering light. Athens, with all its clamor and brilliance, fades softly into the folds of night. The olive trees steady, patient stand watch over the hills. Their branches swaying in slow, thoughtful arcs as if nodding you into sleep. Of resilience, of growth, of slowing down when the world forgets how. You can still feel the warmth of the lamp beside you. Its glow isn't sharp or showy, it's a whisper, a reminder. Let that light stay with you now, not to keep you awake, but to carry you gently into rest. The sounds around you soften. Footsteps fade, the last market shutters close, a dove coos once beneath a roof tile. Even the city seems to exhale. And you? You have walked among trees older than memory, listened to oil drip like poetry into clay, watched a city falter, then forgive itself. There's nothing left to do, nothing left to fix, just this breath. And this one, let the olive branches arch above you like a canopy of calm. Let the earth cradle your weight. Let the stories settle where dreams begin. You are safe. You are enough. And in the silence that follows, may the soft light of old oil and older wisdom carry you into a long, gentle sleep.